single people, on average, are more connected to more different people. As those couples move in together or get married, they become more insular. They see their friends less often. They contact their parents less often. It's like they have their own little world. So who's really alone?
We are here with Dr. Bella DePaulo. You are the author of Single at Heart, The Power, Freedom, and Heart-Filling Joy of Single Life. And I must say, you're the happiest person I've talked to in about a year. And we've only talked for about 1 minute so far. You are radiating joy.
Yes.
Thank you. I do love being single. And
You really do.
It makes me very happy.
Yeah, we can tell. This is incredible.
You're going to change a lot of lives with this interview, Bella.
I hope so. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess let's start, when did you first learn that you were a person who is single at heart? How did you have that realization?
For the longest time, I thought that maybe things would change. So I always liked being single. I never wanted to, be married. I never looked longingly at other people who were coupled, but it seemed like so much a part of our expectations that everybody eventually wants to get married or get coupled at least. So for a long time, I just thought, well, wanting to be married is like getting bitten by a bug. And I haven't gotten bitten yet. And I don't know when I realized that, no, that's never going to happen. I'm always going to love being single. I think it was probably sometime in my 30s. It wasn't like one aha moment, but it was a gradual realization. And when I did know for sure this is who I am, it was wonderful because then I got to fully invest in my single life. I wasn't thinking, well, maybe some guy will come along and then I'll want to live with someone. No, I never will live with anyone. I love living alone. It's such a joy.
Yeah, it seems
You're
like
so happy.
No, and when you had this realization that was not, as you said, one aha moment, but kind of it happened in your 30s. Was it like realizing you're gay and did you have to come out to your family?
Well, no, I never did. And in fact, the idea of being single at heart is something that I came up with a few decades ago. So when I was first coming to realize that single is who I really am, I didn't know there was such a thing as being single and happy and wanting to stay single. So there was no coming out in the sense that there wasn't a known category that I fit into. But I think I hoped that people realized who I was because I never, swooned about some cute guy I saw or, said that I felt badly because I didn't have anyone, which is silly. So I think that it should have been evident to the people around me that I wasn't interested in this dating game.
Mm-hmm. And now, leading up to this, what was the longest romantic relationship that you had been a part of?
Oh, I don't know, probably months, definitely not years.
Interesting.
And it was fine. I have no dating horror stories. When I think back to the guys I dated, and there weren't that many, I think about them fondly. But what was really my most positive thing from those times is how I felt when the relationship ended. I felt so...
You felt so good, right?
I mean, I've
to
been
go
there.
back to my single life. I mean,
I've
that's
been
what I
there.
love. That's what I
Yeah.
felt comfortable in.
Yeah.
There was an article that I was reading from Time Magazine. It was called 9 Ways Being Single Can Improve Your Life. And one of the points was that your mind is uncluttered, and it called being in a relationship mentally expensive. And I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
Because you have
That's
to,
true.
even if you lovingly every time, like a small example is I want to eat dinner. I live with my partner. I got to ask what he wants. Like, what are we doing for dinner? Right.
Right.
When you break up,
exactly.
you break up and then you just eat dinner whenever you want. You're like,
Right.
it's like
Whatever
Ferris
you want.
Bueller's Day Off. You're like, oh, we can do whatever we want.
That's
now.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about really big things too. So, for example, in the year 2000, I had a possibility of a sabbatical out here in California. I was at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, Virginia at the time. And so it was supposed to be for 1 year, but I just loved it out there. And so I just stayed. So I went from one coast to the other. I had a tenured job, which I gave up. I had a whole, friends and family that I had built up that circle there. And I just said, this is what I love. And there was no negotiating with a partner or feeling guilty about wanting to do something if a partner didn't want to do it. And it was like the ultimate freedom to pursue my best life, my most meaningful and fulfilling life, which is out here in sunny California, which I absolutely love.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I also think that speaks to something you have talked about over the years, like where you have more room to grow mentally, like you have more, and I even feel that. So like, being, I've had boyfriends and stuff for longer periods of time, but I've never been married, and I'm 38 now. And I sit and think a lot about how, had I gotten married to that boyfriend 10 years ago or 5 years ago, like, I just don't think I would have experienced the growth, the realization, the aha moments that I have in the past 5-10 years. And so my question is, like, do you think those things can't happen? They just are happening at a way slower pace. How much slower is that pace, in your opinion?
Pace of
the change, like of the development that you will go through.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, people who are coupled or are married can experience personal growth.
Sure.
But I think the single people are especially likely to do so, especially if they're single at heart and they embrace their single lives and they invest in them, because they have, constrained by opportunities and resources and so forth. Single people have more freedom than coupled people do. And so they get to create a life that is most authentic, most consistent with who they really are. And that is an opportunity for personal growth. And so is something else that defies all our stereotypes of what it means to be single. So people use the word alone as a synonym for single, like, oh, poor thing, she's alone. Well, in fact, national surveys show that single people, on average, are more connected to more different people. And other studies that follow people over the course of their lives as they go from being single to a couple to moving in together to getting married, well, as those couples move in together or get married, they become more insular. So they see their friends less often. They contact their parents less often. It's like they have their own little world. So who's really alone?
Yeah.
Very good point. Oh, I love that. And you talk a lot about the story that we've been sold. And it's mostly women. Women have been sold the story that marriage will buy us happiness. I think that a married man, I would guess that a married man actually, a married straight man, I should specify, is happier married because they have somebody to listen to all their shit. Something fell. That was probably a man that was realizing I was right.
Right.
But like with women, and so I think of when I was watching your TED Talk and I was just thinking about how I grew up obsessed with Disney movies, 90s Disney movies, always focused on the princess who was trying to figure out the thing with the prince. And we're really sold this narrative from a young age with our pop culture that we're taking in. And then, you know, when we're playing pretend as a little girl with the babies and getting married and all this stuff. So how do you undo that conditioning for yourself? It doesn't seem like you had to do that for you because you were just... we unfortunately live in a society where it's very brave to be yourself, and especially when yourself is against the grain. But what would you say to people that are kind of scared, but they know in their hearts that maybe single is definitely a way better life choice for them, but they're scared because they're too wrapped up in what everybody else thinks?
Right. Find your people. So in 2015, I started this online Facebook group called the Community of Single People. And it's mostly for single people who like being single. So we talk about everything except what other people think singles are obsessed with, which is dating or trying to find a way to unsingle yourself. We don't talk about any of that. But we talk about, you know, the joys and the challenges and our achievements and post pictures of where we've been. And so I think finding other people who see the world the way you do is important. And of course, I would be remiss in my love of my own book, Single at Heart, if I didn't say, read that, because I think if you read Single at Heart, the power, freedom, and heart-filling joy of single life, you will get a lot of reassurance. And this is really important, that people understand what I did not understand when I was young, that there is a thing called being happily single and wanting to stay single. And even more than that, being happy because you are single and not in spite of it.
Yeah, right. That's a very important point.
Yeah, I think there's like a big part of me and kind of probably what helped me find you, or what serendipitous things happened that I found you online, is because like there is a big part of me that thinks I am single at heart. But the main problem for me, Bella, is I love sex and I like to have a lot of sex. So quite honestly, like how have you tackled that, or what is your relationship with sex, and how has that, how have you gotten sex throughout your life without it feeling like a constant like challenge?
So let me tell you about some of the single at heart people I interviewed and how they get sex in their lives. So Alyssa, who's 27, told me she loves sex, she loves emotional closeness, but she doesn't want to, what we call, ride the relationship escalator, where you keep going up, now we're dating, now we're dating steadily, if people even use that term anymore. Now we're moving in together, now we're merging our finances. She doesn't want to do that. And she lets her partners know right from the beginning. Evan, who's 40, is the same way. He's gay and he likes going on dates. He likes meeting new people, but he tells them right from the beginning, this is, he's not looking for a committed long-term relationship. Jessica, who's 38, calls herself sexually open-minded, and she likes to engage in sexual practices that other people might look down on. And she feels very happy to be single because she can pursue what she likes without the judgment of a partner who might not like that. Another person, Andrea, told me that she's 29, that she actually liked, when she was in college, she liked the hookup thing because it allowed her to compartmentalize. So she said she would spend time with guys and they might even have very intimate conversations, but then it was over and she got to go back to the other parts of her life that she loved, like her classes and her interests and her friends. And so I think in lots of ways, it works out well.
Yeah, it depends on your personal preference.
And of course, some some people just aren't interested. So that's another thing too. And if you're not interested, it's much easier to be single because you don't have anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Being like a very sexual person is exhausting. It's time consuming and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to like constantly like, be kind of taking your care of yourself in that way. Also too, I'm thinking of the people that I know in long-term relationships or marriage that are the happiest. And it's the marriages or relationships that have the most autonomy in them, where they have separate bedrooms, separate homes, separate thing, or they live on other, like I know one couple who's married, they live on opposite coasts and they see each other for like 6 months out of the year. And I'm like, that's and then when you see each other, you're so excited, but then the rest of the year you're kind of like single. So it's like interesting that the happiest relationships that I know, there's some level of, in their relationship that makes them more autonomous than the typical married couple.
Yes. And I've had people who are coupled or even married insist that they're single at heart. And I was a little skeptical at first. Well, I did believe there would be people who are single at heart and married and stay married because they want to honor their vows. Mm-hmm. But they really, they would have been better off single. But other people who were coupled or even married told me, no, I am single at heart. And when I looked more closely at their lives, it was just like what you described. They have a lot of independence. They're not these enmeshed couples. Instead, they have their own space physically. They have their own emotional space. They give each other freedom to, spend time with their friends separately from their partners. So they really are kind of, they persuaded me. I mean, they don't score as high in the single at heart quiz as people who are single, but I agree.
What are some questions from the single at heart quiz? Could you, or like, cause my next question was kind of be like, how do you figure out if you are truly single at heart, and that's not just a story you're telling yourself? You're like, no, guys, I don't want to.
Sure.
Right.
Right, I think. So this is actually one of the most important ones. And it's like, when you think about spending time alone, what thought comes to mind first? Is it, sweet solitude, or, oh no, I might be lonely? Well, the single at heart, almost every single one of them says sweet solitude. And if you are a person who loves your solitude, that alone doesn't mean that you're single at heart, but it's a good first step. That's like a superpower, because if you can be by yourself and find that time relaxing or rejuvenating or good for your mental health or your thoughtfulness or your creativity or your spirituality, well, you are largely protected from feeling lonely. So it's just the opposite of what people think it's like for people who are single. So if you're, single at heart, you're not going to be the stereotypical lonely person. And as you get older, you're not going to be the caricature of a single person who's isolated and lonely. I mean, I'm 70 years old. I'm not isolated and lonely.
Not at all. I feel like we're both single at heart, Corinne.
Yeah. Well,
because when the pandemic happened, Corinne and I don't think you didn't have a boyfriend either, did you? I was single.
I was seeing a guy a little bit in the beginning, but we broke up quickly, and he was like living in Denver anyway.
Right. Bella, it was blissful.
Right.
Yeah. Every day I was so excited to wake up and go, what am I going to do a craft today?
Yeah.
I don't got to worry about no man being like, you doing a craft for a 5-year-old? Fuck you. Yes, I am. And I have like a zany, wacky, like childlike kind of sense of wonderment. And just to not have anybody comment on how you do things, which is no matter how perfect your partner is, they're going to give some type of commentary, even if it's a look. To not have that is so beautiful and important.
Right.
Oh. Yeah. I mean, even yesterday, like I ate for dinner, I chose to eat a bag of like cheese mix munchies, which is when they put Doritos
and
crunchy Cheetos and cheesy sun
Fuck
chips
yeah.
and pretzels in a bag. And I ate the whole thing, Belle. And it was like 1,200 calories.
Bliss.
And that was my dinner. And I was like, I was
Yeah.
just thinking of like the nasty judgment that a boyfriend would have had if I was doing that in front of me. And all I did, me and my dog did it together. And I gave him some of the chips and we had a night. And I feel, you know what? I feel fantastic. My stomach doesn't hurt at all. I feel great.
Good for you. Yeah.
Also,
Food is such a joy.
it's such a joy. I'm realizing too, we had a discussion on the podcast a couple months ago about unconditional love. And I think that romantic love is perhaps the most conditional love that there is.
Yeah.
And that is not good for your soul to experience conditional love. Like, so if you're married from age 19 to 80, and and especially, I'm imagining if you're married from 19 to 80, you probably were born in a decade where that happened often. But like, my God, to have like that much love in your life that is
Conditional.
is conditional. It's got to be kind of.
Well, not only that, but it's also in a way restricting because you feel less free to develop intimacy in your other relationships. And I don't mean necessarily sexual intimacy, but even, if you wanted to spend a lot of time with a particular friend or several friends or dear relatives, there's the risk that your partner would feel like that time belonged to them.
The possessiveness of partnership is very interesting.
Well, that's an interesting point because the reason I broke up with my last boyfriend was because we started dating a couple months after my father had passed away. And he was significantly younger than me, so that also played into it. But he just like, I could tell that like I wasn't being a girlfriend enough to him and it was hurting him. But I honestly just didn't have the capacity to deal with that on top of the grief of losing my father. Cause it's like, I loved that guy, the boyfriend very much, but no offense. Like I love my dad more, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Right. And so, I mean, have for things like that in your life, like, the sadder milestones, how has that been without a partner, and how did your friends or your other people in your life help you through things like that?
Oh, yeah. Well, I can tell you about when my father died. I was in Virginia. He and my mother were in Pennsylvania, so hundreds of miles away.
Yeah.
And my mother called two of my friends before she called to tell me because she thought I would want to have someone there with me when I heard the news.
Interesting.
And that was thoughtful of her, but it was exactly wrong. When I hear important news, and that even includes good news, I like to process it myself.
Oh my God, me too.
Yeah, it's different. You process it differently.
Yes.
Yeah. And then afterwards, I was very, very much comforted and appreciated and welcomed the support of my friends and relatives. And I thought that was something quirky about me. But Carol Kahn did this dissertation where she interviewed 14 women who had been single for a long time and asked them what they liked to do when they first heard something important. And 8 of them said the same thing. They want to process it on their own.
Well, and I can't imagine that another person being in the room when you get important information, good or bad, like you said, it's almost impossible to not be affected by their energy. And I can't imagine that doesn't affect your processing because like one of my greatest things about being in a relationship versus being single, a lot of times, no matter how great the boyfriend is, I have to be the only person in my entire apartment for at least one day out of the week. And if not, I'll go absolutely nuts. You could be in the opposite room and I'll never see you, but I know you're there and your energy and I can't. So with that in mind, like the grieving process.
Stealing a piece of your mind.
Yeah, probably without even trying.
Yeah, without trying.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, sure. Of course. It doesn't have to be conscious at all. It's just, they're there. And what I love about you telling me that story, and I've heard things like that from so many other people, is it counters this insistence that if you are alone, spending time alone, there's something wrong with you. Like you're some loner that's going to go shoot up a school.
Right.
No.
Yeah.
And it's a difference between being alone because you want to be and you enjoy that time and it makes you feel rejuvenated and happy and healthy, as opposed to you're alone because everybody rejected you. I mean, that's a whole different story.
I think there's more people in the world that are married because they felt pressure to.
Yeah.
Like, and
Yes,
I should be married, so I'm married, which is the most lonely feeling in the world, being with somebody you don't actually want to be with.
But I think that, that's a good point. Like, I think we do conflate these two types of aloneness. Like we conflate people who have chosen to be alone and people who, as you say, the world has rejected. And unfortunately, the people who the world has rejected are a louder group of people because they are the ones who go and shoot up a school.
Yeah.
And so then we associate as a society being alone is a bad thing. But like one of the first thoughts I had when my dad died was, I'm so glad I'm not married, so I don't have to deal with a husband on top of this shit.
And his family. Right. He's got a whole ass family you got to deal with.
I was so and now we're at the time where more people's parents are dying as we get into approach our 40s and I see my friends who have to like navigate having a partner and also going through the death of a parent. I actually know a couple who basically got divorced because her father died, and like I could just tell from having been through it myself, the husband was not doing a good job of supporting, and she was like, I don't want to be in this anymore.
I think a lot of people in maybe America especially are kind of emotionally, they're not attuned to their own emotions as much. Like their emotional intelligence is not, because we don't encourage it in school. We don't encourage it like where I think we're just starting to encourage emotional intelligence and introspection in a much bigger way. But that's almost impossible to get if you're being with somebody for so long. It's like, what are your own thoughts?
Yeah.
Another thing about the death of the father, Carla, one of the Single at Heart people in my Single at Heart book, told me that when her father was dying, and she was very close to him, she felt so relieved not to have a romantic partner because she wanted to spend as much time with him as possible.
Yeah.
And that would have been a harder thing to do if she were partnered.
Absolutely.
Do you think we'll start having movies soon? Oh, maybe in our lifetime for kids, like Disney movies, where they're just celebrating a person, man or a woman, or in between, who's just happy being alone?
Yeah. A while back, there's a movie called Brave.
Oh, yes.
It was she was great. Merida, maybe was her name.
Oh, she's alone. Okay,
Anyway.
I know about Brave. I didn't see it though. Yeah,
that's the curly redheaded lady. Okay.
Yeah, but it's about a little girl. We need grown-ups who want to be single and stay single and love it. And it's just appalling how that's just not out there. And it's especially appalling because there are so many people who would relate to that. And there have been hints that people who write movies and come up with ideas for TV shows should have taken. A long time ago, Sex and the City had this scene that was so popular. It was when the four women were at a wedding at the bouquet toss, and the flowers come toward them, and it's right toward them. And they all stand there and let it drop in front of them. And then they look at each other and they make plans for where they're going next. And, why didn't people tune in the creative community? Why didn't they tune into that and realize there's something there? There's something appealing about literally turning your back on the whole fantasy land of marriage.
And on that same note, it's so unappealing to hear female characters because most of that show was them kind of bitching about the men in their lives and not really doing a lot about it. And so like a moment like that, you feel like different cellularly taking that in artistic piece. And then it's just like this whole trope of I was thinking a lot when I was reading, I was skimming over your book about how many people are in marriages and they don't like their husband or wife. I'm like, why? Yeah. And I'm realizing now as we're talking to you, why we're so quick. People write us emails all the time. We're so quick to tell them to break up, but it's because,
but
it's because like maybe it's because we're both single at heart, because we know how precious and amazing your alone time is. Blissful. It's blissful. And I have a boyfriend who I love so much, but I will never not love my alone time. Like that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Yeah. And he's a lot older than me. So technically he's probably going to die before me. And when I think about that, I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do the last couple decades solo. That's fine.
Amazing. Well, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this and I want to, get my book out there and my message out there is because if you are single at heart and you marry because you think it's what you should do, and the other person you marry is not single at heart, that's not fair to them.
Yeah.
It's like, what people say, and it's mocked for being, just a thing they say when a relationship ends. It's not you, it's me. Well, when the person is single at heart, that's actually true.
Yeah. Yeah.
If a relationship ends, it's often not the partner's fault. It's that the person is single at heart and it's never going to work. One thing that convinced me most, powerfully that this is really a thing is when I heard from people who found the one, people they loved, who loved them, who were willing to do anything for them, and yet they just didn't want to be coupled.
Interesting.
And because otherwise people say to you, oh, you just haven't found the right person. Right. You're fooling yourself, blah, 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 blah. The way they dismiss single people's emotions and feelings, the way they never dismiss a married person's. I mean, nobody would say to a married person, oh, you just think you're happy.
Yeah.
You're fooling yourself.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's so deeply ingrained, even the way that we barely, I don't know if we ever, or it's very rarely that we elect a president who is unmarried.
Have we ever?
Because we just don't, there's something in our society that we go, something must be wrong with that person. When I think well, if the person's unmarried, well, then they've had their whole life to devote to the pursuit of social justice and politics and causes, and probably would be more well suited to be president.
Yeah. That's true.
And in fact, there's a lot of research showing that single people are in many ways more giving and caring and altruistic than people who aren't. And you can see that also. Of course, I'm focused on the single couple thing, but also kids, no kids. I think that a president who had no kids is more likely to care about all the kids in the country and not just their kids. Right?
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, because it's so often, especially women, childless, unmarried women are so often called selfish. And as I see more and more of my friends getting married, I agree with your point entirely, where it's like, they care more about their kids. They don't care about, as you said, all the kids. And that it's not like pointing a finger like, oh, one is better, than the other, or like married people are selfish. So I'm not trying to flip it and say that they are selfish, but I do think it's misadvertised when you say, oh, you have kids, you'll care more about the world that they grow up in. It's like, no, I think you'll care more about the how your children specifically grow up in the world, but rather than all the kids growing up in the world. And some of it is just time. Like part of my decision, am I ever changing, my process? Mostly I don't want to have kids, but a big reason is because I think I would have to devote so much time to my own children to give them the life that I would want to, that I would have to stop doing these larger pursuits that I'm really interested in and changing the world at large for better, which I do feel like I have the power to do.
Yes. Good point.
Yeah. I think more people, I know a lot of married people, and a big chunk of them, I'm like, you guys are a lovely couple. You're lovely to be around. I love getting dinner with you. But most, I got to say most, it's like they realized that their sacrifice was too much. Like sacrificing my 50% of my mental capacity to now think about what you want to do and what your input is. It's just where you could be donating that to learning how to play the drums or, having 2 homes or whatever.
Do you have any recommendations? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. And I even feel happy, even when I'm with happy couples who seem happy.
Yeah, totally.
So, for example, if I go out to dinner with a group that includes couples and they seem like a good pair and everything's fine, at the end, I am so happy that I'm not them because they have to go home and be with each other and I get to go home and be alone.
Totally. That's sweet, sweet alone time, girl. It's valuable. Yeah. It's mad valuable.
Exactly.
Do you have any recommendations besides like making films that portray people living single and happy lives, like adjustments that we could make in society from the research that you've done? Like how can we start to make this feel like a viable option for young women and young men in the world?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. So if you're a teacher at any level, you could include the ideas that I'm talking about in your teaching. Same thing for role models. At the government level, oh my gosh, there's so much that can be done. Starting with something easy, the way politicians and candidates talk about, oh, I'm here for families, for working families. Well, first of all, it's so ridiculous because families don't get hired and 2-year-olds aren't great workers.
No, they're awful. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk about them. And then the policies that could change. There are hundreds of laws that benefit and protect only people who are legally married.
Yeah.
And that has got to change. And it's really important stuff like Family and Medical Leave Act. So if you are in an eligible workplace, you can take time off to care for a parent, child, or your spouse. Well, a single person can take time off to care for a parent or child, but there's no one in the place. So I can't take time off to care for a close friend or a dear relative or anyone else. And no one can take that time off to care for me. So those are ways in which we're really stigmatizing and hurting people who are single at heart and are just single. And, we should want people to be there for each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that actually reminds me of one of my biggest pet peeves. We're stand-up comedians, and I've been trying to write a joke about this, but so often on the news, when someone is murdered, it will somehow increase the horror of them being murdered if they have kids, and it just feels so like,
she was a mother,
right? Yeah,
like she's better than you.
Yeah, like is it so? Yeah. So like it's so what the message that I get from that constantly is like, so if you are murdered or die, especially at a young age, and you didn't have kids,
who cares?
Oh, well, less of a loss.
Yeah, really? Well, actually, there's a law. I'm going to say it's funny, but it's not. It's awful, but it's amusing in its awfulness.
Right.
So if you are married and you die, your spouse gets a couple $100 toward final expenses. But if you're single and you die, no one gets that. It's like throw their body in a ditch.
Yeah, what the hell?
Cares?
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it's
I wonder
amazing. It goes along with this concept. Like you could kind of say that a country pushing its people to get its citizens to get married. So they're pushing for traditional family. Whenever you hear a politician belong to any group that has traditional or family, they're usually anti-LGBT, anti-women's rights. So there's just all these awful, awful things. But it goes kind of hand in hand. Like one of the most dangerous types of people to capitalism is somebody who's self-actualized and loves themselves and doesn't feel empty or hollow or ugly or whatever, or less than. And it's nice that it's coming we're talking about being single at heart at a good time when we're also encouraging people to get to know themselves on a much deeper level than they were ever encouraged to do so. And so hopefully that means that more people can more people can realize this before they feel pressured to jump into a marriage? Because I feel like some people you meet and you're like, wait, you're engaged? You just met. Like how often that happens? It's striking.
Yeah. I
Is there
agree. Yeah, there's a lot of pushback from, my message is threatening to people who want to believe that the traditional way is the one and only good and valuable way to live. And so I do get pushback.
That's so interesting. Do you have a comment in your head of something somebody said because they were so threatened by this idea? Because to me, I would say they're so miserable being married that they want you to also be miserable.
Well, this is on page 262 of my Single at Heart book. This is an email I got. It says, "Hi, Bella. Just want to let you know that single people are inferior in every way. They're worthless, useless, lazy, and stupid. There's nothing I hate like single people. Anyone single is completely defective. Otherwise, someone would love them." Now, Bella, I know you found some macro aggressions there, but I want you to use all of your Harvard skills to understand it's entirely your fault. You're single, therefore you suck. You suck because you're single. Say it out loud. You are nothing. Worthless.
That was that.
How's that?
I'm assuming that was a man talking to himself, or a woman. It could be a woman too. That was this person talking to themselves. They were talking to themselves. Yeah. I mean, that's so clear. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and it's also, and it kind of makes me sad for the writer because the writer has it ingrained in it. Let's just say his mind that
just guessing here
that you because you are unmarried and you don't have a romantic partner that no one loves you. When I mean, you're pretty clear from your attitude that you're very loved. You're
one of the happiest people I've ever talked to.
You're emanating love. Yeah. I mean, it just makes me sad that people think that, or people think like if no one, we're a society of people waiting to be chosen. And I find that to be extremely depressing. I haven't waited on a small scale to be chosen for like a prom or a date or anything. And certainly not on a large scale to be chosen.
Yeah. And that goes to another one of the big points of my Single at Heart book, which is that single life, if you love it, if you embrace it and invest in it, it's a more expansive life. Right. So we understand that love is more than just romantic love, that intimacy can include sexual intimacy, but it also includes emotional intimacy, that relationships aren't just romantic relationships. They can include friendships and relationships with colleagues and friends and relatives and mentors and confidants. And all of those kinds of relationships are important. And so in that way, for the single at heart, the risk is not what they would lose if they did not put a romantic partner at the center of their lives, but what they would lose if they did.
Yeah. Oh, I just got chills.
Same. Yeah.
Oof, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. And I think to speak to that, like a problem that I see as I get older is as more and more of my friends find, the one or get married or have kids, like these people that I have spent my whole life with, like they just have less time for me. Right. And also their interests become different from mine. And it doesn't mean that I like them less as people, but we're just on different paths. And I know you created this Facebook group, but do you have any other recommendations other than that? Like, so how do we find people that are on similar journeys? Because I'm really interested in that, in finding people like that. I found a little through Wicca, but that's not the norm.
Yeah. I think we need more ways to do this. Right. And I think as the idea or the concept of being single at heart becomes more widely known, I think there will be more people who will self-identify as single at heart and will be open to friendships and And what's really great, if you do find, I know I'm not giving you great suggestions for how to find these friends,
okay.
but
They're not available.
if you do, yeah. So, well, I think they may be, but they're not saying that they're single at heart because it's so stigmatized. People say, oh, you're just fooling yourself. You're not really happily single. But what's great about having friends who are single at heart is that they are really present in the friendship. So they're not looking past you for the romantic partner who might be on the horizon, or they're not thinking about the partner who might be waiting for you at home. And they're not going to do what people who get coupled do, which is demote you from, maybe you used to go out to dinner, now you go out to lunch, or maybe they saw you a lot, now they see you maybe once in a while. So it's a whole different kind of friendship.
Yeah. Well, I end up spending a lot of time with straight men because I've found that even when they are in relationships, they still live like they're single at heart. So that's
all straight men are single at heart.
That's been my fix for it.
Funny. Yeah.
But truthfully, it's not like because we're stand-up comedians, I think we actually have the luxury of being around a lot more older single people than most people have access to. So that's certainly been good. But unfortunately, when you're most women, even female comedians, I think are still distracted, as you're kind of saying, by this quest that society has put us on, where we're looking for the one. Whereas men, I mean, I said it to be joking.
Distracted by tits.
But I kind of am serious. They live like they're single at heart, or they're not on a quest to find the one. They're just on a quest. They're not even on a quest. They just found someone in the vicinity, as we say on this show.
Found them.
And it's not that distracting to them.
Yeah.
Because it's like a partner, not a soulmate. And a soulmate just takes up so much more headspace.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're stand-up comedians, and I think you should come up with gigs to do about this. I mean, take the role of someone who's single at heart and what they're really thinking to themselves. So imagine, for example, when someone chose their engagement ring and everybody around them squeals like, oh, they make fun of that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I recently made an observation that men to me are like a promotional tote bag. Like, I'll use this, but I didn't need this. And
oh my gosh.
On date nights, no one will laugh, but on, Monday through Thursday, cackles, because you can't laugh at that in front of when your boyfriend's paying the bill. That's not good.
Okay.
And I think we get a lot of, on this show, we get a lot of pushback from people leading more traditional lives who I think feel, for lack of a better word, triggered by our conversations on here. Like we are somehow hating on married people, or that we have some vendetta against them, or that the whole show is us being bitter. When I've tried to express multiple times that we spend a lot of time talking about options other than marriage, or perhaps maybe the downfalls of marriage and traditional life, because that's not something that's been talked about a lot. And there are just so many spaces where you can talk about how great marriage is, and there's not enough where.
Absolutely.
So how do you have tools to help people feel less triggered, or to explain to them that we're not attacking their traditional lifestyle? We're just presenting a different option.
Yeah, we're presenting one that's more fun. Sorry, hater.
Right. So the way I think of it is that single at heart and having an openness to that is part of a whole bigger project of people getting to live their best, most authentic lives. It's part of the whole process of when people who weren't heterosexual felt stigmatized and couldn't say who they really were, or when women were stuck in more of a traditional box. I mean, some still are, but it's much less so now. And so I think that people who are drawn to coupled life, who really do flourish there more than they would if they were single, they should get to do that.
Yeah.
No one needs to say that Everyone just assumes that. So the reason that I need to talk about single at heart and focus on single people and be a messenger for the way single life can be fulfilling and more fulfilling than coupled life for people who are single at heart is because that message isn't out there. So it's not that I want to dump on, married people or coupled or make fun of them. But I do want to show that people who are single should feel just as proud of their lives. And in some ways, if you are single at heart and you admit it and you don't try to hide that, that's even, in a way, it's even more admirable because you're going against the grain. You're taking the risk that people will mock you or disbelieve you and say, oh, you're just fooling yourself. But it's important because you can then be a role model for other people who love being single, but they don't want to admit it, or they think, oh, this really gets to me. Some people who love being single have written to me and they think there's something wrong with them. So, they'll go to therapy and they'll buy self-help books. And how weird is that someone who loves their life is worried that it means there's something wrong with you. If you love your life, congratulations. Yeah. You're doing
You're one of the
great.
few. Yeah, that's an amazing, beautiful, blessed position to be in.
Oh my gosh.
This has been a lovely interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is there anything else?
I love talking to you.
Yeah, we love it. I knew that this was going to be great, and I can't wait to read the whole book. Is there anything else that you want people to know? Other things that you've written or places where people can find you and follow you? Plug anything you want right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, my website is belladepaulo.com, BELLADEPAULO.com. And I have been writing the Living Single blog for Psychology Today since 2008.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Continue living your best single life. This was such a great and unique interview, and I'm so excited for our listeners to hear this. This has been Guys We Fucked, the anti-slut shaming podcast. We'll talk to you next Friday.